Last week, we looked at how Mark travelled throughout Africa, how he reunited with Peter and Paul, and how Paul finally saw what an amazing saint Mark was. But finally, last week, we saw how he received a vision telling him that his time had come to return to Alexandria to be martyred. The church in Ananias and Justus's hands had grown significantly, and there were now churches all throughout the city of Alexandria, and it kept growing with Mark there as well. And soon the city was split between those who knew Jesus was the one God they had been waiting for, and those who rejected Jesus no matter what. Those that hated Jesus rediscovered an old God that they had forgotten. The old God of Alexandria before Alexander rebuilt the city. This God was the great serpent, and they called him Serapis. They set up feasts to Serapis every year, and these became the rallying point for pagans. One day, the feast of Serapis coincided with Easter as Mark was leading the Christian celebrations. The worshippers of Serapis deliberately marched through the church's street so that their crowd would be offended by the Easter celebrations and a riot would break out. In the riot, they isolated Mark from his congregation and dragged him out of the church by the neck with a rope and pelted him with stones. The governor of the city was a pagan, so when the people brought that matter before him, the riot, he blamed Mark and threw him in prison. But Jesus appeared to Mark in that prison and assured him that Mark would be with Jesus the very next day. So the next day came, and they subjected Mark to another round of stoning. Mark looked up to heaven and said, "Into your hands I commend my spirit," and he died. The pagans had hoped to torture Mark for longer and were disappointed, so they planned to desecrate Mark's body. When they had cut off his head, the worst storm Alexandria had ever known took over, and lightning struck any pagan that would come near Mark's body. Some brave Christians rushed out to get Mark's corpse, and as they did, the clouds cleared just around them. They took Mark's body and buried it in their church. And according to St. Dimitri of Rostov, they also kept the original manuscript of Mark's Gospel that he wrote on papyrus there. And it was still in that church during St. Dimitri's lifetime. So, Mark's martyrdom ends our look at Mark directly, but next week we'll start to look at those people that Mark inspired and influenced to have their own amazing Christian histories, like the first Alexandrian convert Mark made, Ananias.